Going live, brothers. Hello, boys and girls. We're going live here on the Facebooks. Boom, there we are. What's going on, everybody? And good evening. Good evening. I used to like, it when Alfred Hitchcock would come out, and I'd try to imitate him. Hello, I'm Alfred Hitchcock, and welcome to tonight's Tale of Terror. Something like that. So, anyhow, we got a big night tonight, you guys. Probably one of the longest stories in this book. So we're gonna probably be hitting. Well, we might go over an hour, I'm guessing. Good evening, Kevin, and welcome, my buddy. Hey, Shannon. Hey, Jessica. How are you, dudes? So, anyhow, yeah, it's going to be long ones, and I kind of wanted to run through some backstory on this story as well, and talk about. Well, tonight's story is called Eddie's Basement, and basically we are. Yeah, I mean we're kind of, I don't know. It's I mean it's obviously about Ed Gein, right? So we're yeah, it's about Ed Gein and all that stuff back in the 50s. So I wanted to share with you some of the story, and it's just a short bit of research that I did before I wrote this story. And let's see here. I'm actually trying to bring up the live video here for myself. Do. And for some, there it is. Okay, there we go. All right, everything's set. All right, so we're talking about Ed Gein. He was born Edward Theodore Gein, August 27th, 1906, and he died July 26, 1984. He is also known as the Butcher of Plainfield or the Plainfield Ghoul. He was an American murderer, suspected serial killer, and body snatcher. So, he was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin on August 27th. The second of two sons to George Philip Gein and Augusta Wilhelmine Gein. Gein had an older brother named Henry. Augusta, who was fervently religious and nominally Lutheran, frequently preached to her sons about the innate immorality of the world, the evil of drinking, and her belief that all women were naturally promiscuous and instruments of the devil. Well, we all know that, right? She reserved time every afternoon to read to them from the Bible, usually selecting verses from the Old Testament and the book of Revelation concerning death, murder, and divine retribution. Gein idolized and became obsessed with his mother. George Gein worked as a carpenter, a tanner, and in the city fire department. He also owned a local grocery shop, but soon sold the business and left the city with his family to live on a 155-acre farm in the town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, which became their permanent residence. Augusta took advantage of the farm's isolation by turning away outsiders who could have influenced her sons. Gein left the family farm only to attend school. Outside of school, he spent most of his time doing chores on the farm. Gein was shy. Classmates and teachers remembered him as having strange mannerisms, such as seemingly random laughter, as if he were laughing at his own personal jokes. Augusta punished Gein whenever he tried to make friends. According to family acquaintances, despite his poor social development, Gein did fairly well in school, particularly in reading. On April 1st, 1940, Gein's father died of heart failure at the age of 66. Gein and his brother Henry began doing odd jobs around town to help cover living expenses. The brothers were generally considered reliable and honest by the rest of the community. While both worked as handymen, Geen also frequently babysat for neighbors. He enjoyed babysitting, seeming to relate more easily to children than adults. Henry began dating a divorced mother of two and planned to move in with her. He worried about his brother's attachment to their mother and often spoke ill of her around Geen, who responded with shock and hurt. On May 16, 1944, Geen was burning away marsh vegetation on the property. The fire got out of control, drawing the attention of the local fire department. By the end of the day, the fire having been extinguished and the firefighters gone, Geen reported Henry missing. With lanterns and flashlights, a search party searched for 43-year-old Henry, whose dead body was found lying face down. Apparently, Henry had been dead for some time, and it appeared that the cause of death was heart failure, not burned injuries. It was later reported by biographer Harold Schechter that Henry had bruises on his head. Police dismissed the possibility of foul play, and the county coroner later officially listed asphyxiation as the cause of death. Little shifty. With Henry deceased, Ed and Augusta were now alone. Augusta had a paralyzing stroke shortly after Henry's death, and Ed devoted himself to taking care of her. Sometime in 1945, he later recounted, he and his mother visited a man named Smith, who lived nearby, to purchase straw. According to Ed, Augusta witnessed Smith beating a dog. A woman inside the Smith residence came outside and yelled for him to stop, but Smith beat the dog to death. Augusta was extremely upset by the scene. However, what bothered her did not appear to be the brutality toward the dog, but rather the presence of the woman. Augusta told Ed that the woman was not married to Smith and so had no business being there, and angrily called her Smith's harlot. She had a second stroke soon after, and her health deteriorated rapidly. Augusta died on December 28, 1945, at the age of 67. Ed was devastated by her death. In the words of Schechter, he had lost his only friend and one true love, and he was absolutely alone in the world. Now, Geen held on to the farm and earned money from odd jobs. He boarded up rooms used by his mother, including the upstairs, downstairs parlor, and living room, leaving them untouched. While the rest of the house became increasingly squalid, these rooms remained pristine. Geen lived thereafter in a small room next to the kitchen. Around this time, he became interested in reading pulp magazines and adventure stories, particularly those involving cannibals or Nazi atrocities, specifically concerning Ilse Koch, who selected tattooed prisoners for death in order to fashion lampshades and other items from their skins. Geen received a farm subsidy from the federal government starting in 1951. He occasionally worked for the local municipal road crew and crop threshing crews in the Plainfield area. Sometime between 1946 and 1956, he also sold an 80-acre parcel of land that Henry had owned. Now here are his crimes that are confirmed. On the morning of November 16, 1957, 58-year-old Plainfield hardware store owner Bernice Warden disappeared. The hardware store's truck was seen driving out of the rear of the building around 9:30 a.m. The hardware store saw few customers the entire day. Some area residents believe that it was because of deer hunting season. Warden's son, Deputy Frank Sheriff Warden, entered the store around 5 p.m. to find the cash register open and bloodstains on the floor. Frank Warden told investigators that on the evening before his mother's disappearance, Geen had been in the store and was expected to have returned the next morning for a gallon of antifreeze. A sales slip for the antifreeze was the last receipt written by Warden on the morning that she disappeared. That evening, Geen was arrested at West Plainfield grocery store, and the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department searched the Geen farm. Now, this is what they found at the farm. They discovered Warden's decapitated body in a shed on Gein's property. She was hung upside down by her legs with a crossbar at her ankles and ropes at her wrist, like a dressed-out deer. She had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle, and the mutilations were made after she died. They also found whole human bones and fragments, a wastebasket made of human skin covering several chairs, skulls on his bedposts, female skulls, some with the tops sawn off, bowls made from human skulls, a corset made from the human torso of a female, skinned from shoulders to waist, leggings made from human leg skin, masks made from the skin of female heads, Mary Hogan's face mask in a paper bag, Mary Hogan's skull in a box, Bernice Warden's entire head in a burlap sack, Bernice Warden's heart in a plastic bag in front of Gein's potbelly stove, 9 vulvas in a shoebox, a young girl's dress and the vulvas of 2 females judged to have been about 15 years old, a belt made from female human nipples, 4 noses, a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, a lampshade made from the skin of a human face, and fingernails from female fingers. So, these artifacts were photographed at the State Crime Laboratory and then decently disposed of. When questioned, Gein told investigators that between 1947 and 1952, he had made as many as 40 nocturnal visits to 3 local graveyards to exhume recently buried bodies, while he was in a dazed-like state. On about 30 of those visits, he said he came out of the daze while in the cemetery, left the grave in good order, and returned home empty-handed. On the other occasions, he dug up the graves of the recently buried middle-aged women he thought resembled his mother, and took the bodies home where he tanned their skins to make his paraphernalia. Hey, Bobby, welcome. Gein also admitted to stealing from 9 graves and led investigators to their location. Alan Wilmovsky of the State Crime Laboratory participated in opening 3 test graves identified by Gein. The caskets were inside wooden boxes. The top boards ran crossways, not lengthwise. The tops of the boxes were about 2 feet below the surface in sandy soil. Gein had robbed the graves soon after the funerals while the graves were not completed. The test graves were exhumed because authorities were uncertain as to whether the slight Gein was capable of single-handedly digging up a grave during a single evening. They were found as Ed Gein described. Soon after his mother's death, Gein began to create a woman suit so that he could become his mother, to literally crawl into her skin. He denied having sex with the bodies he exhumed, explaining they smelled too bad. During State Crime Laboratory interrogation, Gein also admitted to shooting 51-year-old Mary Hogan, a tavern owner missing since December 8, 1954, whose head was found in his house, but he later denied memory of details of her death. A 16-year-old youth, whose parents were friends of Gein and who attended baseball games and movies with him, reported that Gein kept shrunken heads in his house, which he had described as relics sent by a cousin who served in the Philippines during World War II. Upon investigation by the police, these were determined to be human facial skins, carefully peeled from corpses and used by Gein as masks. Well, he's also suspected of additional murders and missing people. Georgia Jean Weckler, 8 years old, disappeared near her farm in Fort Atkinson on May 1st, 1947. Evelyn Grace Hartley, 14, went missing while babysitting a 20-month-old girl at the home of La Crosse State College professor Viggo Rasmussen on the evening October 24th, 1953. Victor Harold Travis, 42, a resident of Adams County, went off to deer hunt with an acquaintance, Raymond Burgess, on November 1st, 1952. Those two are missing. In addition, Gein has also been tentatively linked to the June 1954 disappearance of neighbor James Walsh, 32. Walsh and his wife lived near Gein, who performed chores for her after her husband went missing. Gein also investigated for potential involvement of the August 1956 disappearance of Irene Keating, 30 years old, who was last seen in Plainfield, and in the attempted abduction of Judy Rodenkall, 16, from Auroraville. All right. So, Gein's house, the outbuildings, and his 195-acre property were appraised at $4,700. His possessions were scheduled to be auctioned off on May 30th, 1958. Amidst rumors that the house and the land it stood on might become a tourist attraction, early on the morning of March 20th, the house was destroyed by fire. A deputy fire marshal reported that a garbage fire had been set 75 feet from the house by a cleaning crew who was given the task of disposing refuse. That hot coals were recovered from the spot of the bonfire, but that the fire did not spread along the ground from that location to the house. Arson is suspected, but the cause of the fire was never officially determined. So Gein's Ford sedan, which he used to haul the bodies of his victims, was sold at public auction for $780, which is today's equivalent of $8,300, and it was sold to a carnival sideshow operator, Bunny Gibbons. Gibbons charged carnival goers 25 cents admission just to see it. And Ed Gein died at the Mendota Mental Health Institute due to respiratory failure secondary to lung cancer on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77. Now, several movies were inspired by Ed Gein. Psycho was one of them. And also House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and of course the Texas Chainsaw Massacre are all movies that were inspired, and books that were inspired by Ed Gein and his little brand of craziness. So, anyhow, with that all being said, welcome again to Horror Hump Days. We're on the second to the last story of the book. So next week's Horror Hump Days will be the last one for Thin Spots, and then we're going to take a week break, and then we'll come back and we'll start reading my book, Pavor Nocturnus. Alrighty? Alright. So without further ado, I say let's jump into this, everybody. Let's see. Well, where the hell is my book? There it is. Alright. Eddie's Basement. Oh, this happens to be the favorite story out of the book of Beth Paulson. Just so everybody knows. Eddie's Basement. She took a long drag of her Pall Mall and let it flow slowly from her mouth. She flicked the ashes into the hotel ashtray and pulled the phone onto the bed with her. She wasn't looking forward to this call. Lee explicitly told her he did not want her to go on this trip. Said the story was a little too gruesome for her, and he didn't like the idea of her traveling to another state without him. Lee Decker was a writer and was planning on a book about the Butcher of Plainfield. He had written and published several books regarding the macabre, and this would be his first book of non-fiction. Oh, I'm not done living them out there, Bobby. He was also Fanny's boyfriend of 2 years, and they occasionally worked as a team. He would do research, and he would write the book. She would do the research, and he would write the book. She was also a painter, as well as a great photographer, and she wanted not only to help with the research, but also snap some photos for his book. She ran through her head what she'd say, and when she had something scripted in her head, well, she crushed out her cigarette and dialed collect. Hello? Lee sounded distant. Hi, honey, Franny said. She knew that certain tone in her voice would always take him off guard. Franny? He said. Where the hell are... You know where I am, silly, she said. But if you want specifics, I'm at the Holiday Inn in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Lee let out a sigh. Franny, now before you get your drawers in a wad, you just listen to me. You've got meetings with your publishing house for the next few days, and then you've got your fishing trip with the boys in Brainerd. I can use that time to get some great photos and some facts for your book. Look, I get it. I really do. But did you have to just leave like that? I walked out of the apartment this morning and no car. I had to take the damn trolley downtown. I hate taking the trolley. I figured it would be easier to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. She always used that one on him, and it always worked. She made sense, and it would really free him up. He hated working with his publishers because they were always trying to censor his work. His agent even tried to get him to write science fiction instead of his horror stories. I don't know if you've read the newspaper this morning, Lee said, but the house is gone. Gone? She said, a little off guard. What do you mean gone? They were going to auction his house and property off. Rumor has it that someone wanted to buy it for a tourist attraction. It mysteriously caught fire this morning, burned to the ground. Think they saved the car, but not much else. Did they say who they think started the fire? I don't think the citizens of Plainfield wanted their quiet little village turned into a tourist trap. Figured it would pull the crowd from the Dells. You think they started it? I don't know. Could be. Just be careful out there, honey. I don't think they like strangers poking around in their business. There's already been thousands of people turning that town upside down, trying to get a piece of the action. People are dark. And that's why I write what I do. Okay, I'm gonna get a burger and head out there. Just be careful, baby, okay? I will. Uh-huh. Love you. Love you too. Franny hung up with a smile on her face. She had won that one. She pulled a bottle of vodka from a bucket of ice she had on the vanity and poured herself a plastic cupful. She tipped a sip and then pulled out another cigarette and snapped a match to it. She looked at the road map splayed out before her on her bed. She looked at it closely and circled the town of Bancroft and wrote Mary's Tavern next to it. Then next to the circle she drew around Plainfield, she wrote Warden's Hardware. Just north of Plainfield, she circled the town of Almond and wrote Spirit Land Cemetery. To the south of Plainfield, she circled Hancock Cemetery. And west of that, she circled a plot of land and wrote The Butcher's Homestead. She opened the drawer of the nightstand and pulled out the Gideon's Bible that sat in every hotel drawer across America. Just in case, she thought to herself, and then folded up her map and tucked it into the front cover of the black book. She wasn't sure if Mary's Tavern would be open, the owner being one of the butcher's victims. But there were a few cars in the lot, and the neon beer signs were lit. There was a banner that proclaimed, "Welcome Hunters." Lee was the outdoorsman. He hunted and fished. She enjoyed the outdoors, but not the killing of critters and slaying of fish. She didn't know what season it was, but perhaps there would be more information to gather with some of the local hunters. It is one thing to be a stranger and walk into a small-town bar, usually filled with regulars. But to be a woman is a whole different story, especially in the conservative Midwest ruled by Lutherans and Catholics in the 1950s. But she paid no mind. She was a big city girl that lived by her own rules. That was part of her allure for Lee, and a repellent for others like the men who drank Pfeifers and rail brandy in a smoky old bar. Hank was bellowing through the jukebox about someone's crazy heart. The place smelled of old cigarettes and beer. Whatever conversations that were had by this crowd of 8 men had stopped the moment the front door closed, and Fanny stood with her trademark smile, scanning the room with those intense green eyes. "Wow, 100 stars. Thank you very much, Bobby." She was dressed in her usual blue jeans, cuffed above the ankles, low-top Chuck Taylors, a t-shirt beneath a faded jean jacket, and a red bandana tying her auburn hair back. If she cared, she'd notice every pair of eyes pulling those jeans off of her. Fanny plopped her purse on the bar and pulled out a cigarette, and after noticing none of these gentlemen weren't going to light it for her, she snapped her Zippo and took a long drag. The bartender, a portly middle-aged man, placed an ashtray in front of her and took her order. "I'd love a vodka and sour, please," she said, "and some information if you've got it." "Lady," the bartender said, pouring rail vodka into a small glass, "you can have all the vodka you can pay for. Maybe you'd even get one of these gents to buy one for you. But information? Don't think you'll find that here." She looked around the bar, returning the stare she was getting. "I doubt anyone here would buy me a drink," she exhaled and smiled. "So maybe you can help me with some information." "Like I said," he pushed the drink in front of her, "no one here knows shit, pardon my French. We're quiet folk who keep to ourselves." "Is that how the owner of this place got killed? Without anyone knowing about it?" "Careful there. You don't want to get cocky in a place like this." "Can you at least tell me a little bit about Mary? She must have been pretty important."
"Look, Mary was loved by everyone in town. She had a reputation. She was kind of like you. Swore like a soldier, had no filter, shot from the hip. But everybody loved her."
"Except Ed."
"I don't know nothing about him."
"I'm not asking about him. I'm asking about Mary. Heard she used to let teens drink in here, too."
The bartender let out a sigh. "Yeah, sure. She let a few of the local teens drink in here, but she never put up with any nonsense. Cops are never called out here."
"Except when they found Mary's head in a bag at his house."
"Are you a reporter?"
"Something like that."
The bartender was getting irritated. "Look, there's been hundreds of reporters from all over the globe in and out of here. They asked all the questions. You ain't going to be printing anything that hasn't seen print already."
Fanny crushed out her cigarette and changed tactics.
She took a sip from her glass and then smiled at the bartender.
She held out her hand to him. "I apologize," she said. "It was rather rude of me to ask you about Mary so soon after, well, what happened. My name is Franny Boie. I'm not a reporter.
Boy? The bartender asked, giving her a hand, a soft shake. That's an odd last name.
It's German. What was your name?
Lloyd. Lloyd Mayweather.
It's nice to meet you.
Likewise. So, you're not a reporter?
I am not. I'm researching for a book.
You're a writer.
I've written a few things, but the research is for a friend's book.
Huh. Who would want to read a book about Mary?
Actually, he's writing about our friend Edward.
Lloyd let out a deep sigh. He wiped the bar top and then slung the towel over his shoulder. Look, he planted two meaty hands on the bar back and looked her in the eyes. You seem like a nice enough kid, but people in these parts are already tired with all the inquiries about Ed. Some half-wit wanted to buy his house and turn it into a goddamn tourist trap, for fuck's sakes. Excuse my French. These are good, quiet people around here. Don't like all the media attention. That author, Block, I think his name is, already been all over the place asking about things in Plainfield. I don't think he got anywhere with it, but you creative types always know how to spin a tale, even if you get squat out of people. No offense.
None taken. Franny smiled. So, you're not going to help me, are you, Mr. Mayweather?
It's not that I don't want to help you. It's that I can't. That Eddie guy never showed up in here too much. Thought he was too pure to step foot in here. I only seen him in here twice, and that was a long time ago to fetch his daddy, and a couple times to find his brother Henry.
Franny pulled out her little notepad and started to scribble. So, Ed never frequented Mary's Tavern?
No. His dad was in here a lot. His old lady would send the boys to get him. Then after he passed away, Henry showed up and took up where his dad left off.
And what was his brother Henry like?
Lloyd shrugged. I don't know. Quiet guy. Kind of strange. He'd just sit in the back booth over there and mull over whiskey sodas. I know Mary didn't much like him. Gave her the creeps.
Henry?
Yep. She said he was always watching her. Creeped her out.
Franny finished her vodka and plopped it down. She took out a couple of Washingtons and laid them on the bar. Thank you, Mr. Mayweather. I appreciate your time, she said, collecting herself. She winked at a few of the men staring at her, and she wiggled her fingers in a goodbye gesture that got them blushing and returning back to their drinks. The 52 Kaiser, Manhattan, stood out like a sore thumb on a road dominated by Ford pickup trucks. The car was a canary yellow, but was beginning to be a hue of brown from all the dirt bucked up from the gravel roads. Gonna have to wash the car before I come home, Franny thought to herself. Lee was pretty laid back, but always fussed over his vehicles. She pulled up to the gates of Spirit Land Cemetery. She thought the name was odd, like a moniker for an amusement park for the dead. She put the car in park and grabbed her camera from the passenger seat. The ground was mushy and wet from the melting snow. Franny was amazed at how well kept the cemetery grounds were. Even the older tombstones were scrubbed and free of moss. Some of the graves had fresh flowers planted near them. Hey, Chuck. Welcome, buddy. She snapped a few shots of the older stones and began looking at some of the newer stones. Maybe one of these are the robbed graves, she wondered. Maybe some of them have already been dug up by the investigators. She scanned the area for fresh dirt. She found 3 graves that had been disturbed, and snapped several shots of these. Lee is going to love these shots, she said to herself. Can I help you, Missy? A man's voice asked from behind her. He surprised her, and she jumped, almost dropping her camera. Oh, my goodness, she yelped. Just looking. Kind of a morbid place to be looking, if you don't mind me saying. She lowered her camera and let it dangle on its strap around her neck. Did you have a dearly departed buried here? The man asked. The man was thin and wearing insulated bib overalls. He had an Elmer Fudd cap on that shadowed his intense eyes. She thought about lying. She bit her lip. I've got an aunt buried here. She died years ago, and I was in town and thought I'd come pay her my respects. What's your auntie's name? The man said. I've been caretaker here for over 25 years. Agatha Smith. Don't know anything about Agatha Smith being buried here, and I've buried most of them. Maybe it wasn't this cemetery. It's hard to remember. It was so long ago. Could be. There's a village cemetery in town, or St. John's on the east side of town. I guess I'll go check there. Thank you. The man stepped forward, and she stepped back. Her guts began to jitter. You wouldn't be one of them reporters, would you? He asked. There was no emotion on that face. She could see lines cut into it, telling her he had a hard life. No, she said, a little offended. I told you, I know what you said, but I don't think you're telling me the truth. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, sir. Now, if you'll excuse me, this is a place of rest. His voice was aggressive now. The dead don't need you stepping all over them when they's trying to spend the afterlife in peace. Sir, I wasn't... Stop your lying tongue, girlie. You big world city types don't have any respect for the dead or the kilt. I catch you in here snapping your goddamn newspaper photos again, you'll be resting with 'em. Fanny was tearing up, and before she fell all apart, she ran to her car and trailed off, kicking rocks in her wake. She stopped on a dirt, one-lane road that split two lakes. She wrestled a cigarette out of her pack and broke it. She tossed it down on the floor of the car and took out another, cursing. Her trembling hand snapped the Zippo light, and she puffed several times and then laid back on the seat and allowed herself to cry. I told you, Fanny. It was Lee's voice in her head. People in those small towns aren't as friendly as stories say they are. You should come home. You should just fuck off, she said out loud and took another drag. She grabbed the map and scribbled out Hancock Cemetery. She wrestled with it, trying to fold it back up and grab the Gideon. A lot of good you did, she reproached the Bible, and then shoved the map inside the front cover and slammed it shut. Okay, Fanny, she thought. Shake it off. You got this. Come on. Off we go to Plainfield. Just come home, baby, the Lee voice said. We can make the trip in the summertime together. You and me. Most of the smoke will clear and we'll be a little more welcome. What do you say? I say strike while the iron's hot, she announced to the empty cab of her car. She put the car in drive and turned on the radio. Some preacher screamed about repentance and the glory of God. No Elvis the Pelvis, no Jerry Lee or Everly Brothers. Fanny let out a big sigh and headed south to Plainfield. The village was quiet. A few trucks chugged down the gravel streets, and a few pedestrians walked the sidewalks.
There were a group of 3 kids playing at the park in town. On the corner up ahead sat Warden's Hardware. She drove by slowly, scanning the area for a parking spot where she could snap a photo of it without the locals losing their minds. She parked kitty corner from it and snapped one from the driver's side window. Warden's Hardware is where Eddie killed the owner, Bernice. They found her face hanging on the wall. It looked as if he was going to use it for a mask. Fanny unconsciously touched her own face and then jumped when she did. She looked around, making sure no one was watching her. Of course there wasn't. There wasn't anybody out on the streets right now. But maybe from the other side of the windows, peeking at the stranger through the curtains. Another one of them goddamn reporters, they'd spit. Why can't they just leave well enough alone? They also knew why the media couldn't. It was one of the most gruesome crimes in the modern world. A quiet but helpful farmer kills and dismembers women, digs up freshly dead women, and uses their body parts to make a costume of his mother. Yeah, that was going to stay in a town for a long, long time. She couldn't blame the townsfolk for being standoffish to strangers, but they had to understand why they were all here looking for information. She spotted a diner a few buildings away, and she decided to fill her stomach first, calm her nerves, and then maybe try and get a scoop from some of the patrons. She snapped a few photos of the main drag and then tucked her camera away in the glove box. The little bells tinkled as she opened the door, and of course everyone stopped their conversations and looked. Immediately, there were reproachful looks, and she expected them this time. The place was full, with 2 stools empty at the counter. She took her place at one of them, wearing the warmest smile she could muster. "Help you, honey?" the waitress said. She was middle-aged, with too much red lipstick that only accentuated the frown she wore, painted eyebrows that were a bit too thick and arched in an angry curve. I'll start with a cup of coffee, please," Fanny said, pulling out a cigarette from her soft pack. "If you want to smoke, you're going to have to do it outside. The owner doesn't allow smoking in his restaurant." "Oh, sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just don't smoke in here. You want pie with your coffee?" "Excuse me?" "Pie, honey. It's fruit surrounded with a crust." "Oh, I know pie. Can I just see the menu?" The waitress plops a hot cup of coffee in a saucer in front of her, and then smacks a 1-page menu down on the counter. She pretends to gaze at the menu and uses the mirror behind the counter to size up the people eating. All of them are locals, and it made her feel like the new kid at school, having lunch for the first time in the cafeteria. There were several conversations happening around her, and she was scanning them for any information regarding the murders. But there were none. In some ways, she understood that the people of this town witnessed one of their own caught up in a horrendous act. Someone whom everyone trusted to some degree to work on their farms, babysit their kids, and do odd jobs around their homes. She imagined they'd gotten enough attention from the news hounds and other media. She was sure it had all been talked to death about it. She took a sip from her coffee, and the waitress came back, looking at her impatiently. "Did you decide?" she asked. I would just like some eggs and toast," Fanny said. "No bacon or sausage? It's locally sourced." "No, thank you." "How do you like your eggs?" "Over easy." The waitress ripped the ticket, walked to the grill, and pinned it above the cook station. She said something to the cook, who in turn looked over his shoulder at Fanny. He rolled his eyes and then turned his attention to her ticket. After making her rounds through the diner, the waitress came back, taking off her apron, and walked up to Fanny. "Come on, honey," she said. I'll come have a smoke with you. Fanny was surprised. Okay. They both stepped out the front and sat on the bench that was under the large window. So I've got 5 minutes, the waitress said. What is it you need to know? Excuse me? Fanny said, caught off guard. Look, I get a 5-minute smoke break before the people in there start losing their minds because I didn't fill their coffee cup or their water glass. You ain't from town because you don't dress like any girl from around the area. So I figure you're a reporter here about the murders. Wow, you're pretty good at that. I'm a waitress. Been walking that floor in there for 12 years now. I know people. Then what do you know about Ed? Honestly, the guy was creepy, but he was a really nice guy. Kept to himself mostly. But that was because his mama was a religious fanatic, and that probably beat the poor guy when he was a kid, and browbeat him when he was an adult. I don't know if I believe he did all those crimes. They always say it's the quiet ones. They do, but Ed was always willing to help anybody out. He doted on his mother, that's true, but any chance he could get out of that pigsty of a home, he'd take it. That was usually to work for someone, or sometimes he would catch a baseball game. Hearing all the things he admitted to was a shocker. I can hardly believe it. Hell, most of the town couldn't believe it. I would have thought it was his brother Henry. He was the aggressive one. But didn't Henry die in a fire or something like that? The waitress puffed on her cigarette, the filtered gummy with her lipstick. Supposedly, she looked around and then leaned forward and spoke softer. They never found his body. Are you sure about that? Dexter Gunner works for the coroners. Comes here every Saturday night. Has a cup of coffee and a piece of lemon meringue pie. He's a bit sweet on me, truth be told, and that boy tells me everything. A bit gruesome, but he tips good. He said there was no body brought in. Fanny thought she could check in with the coroner's office to clarify that. So, you think Henry did all the killing? Fanny asked her. Well, that's me. That's what me and a lot of other people think. Ed didn't fit the profile, as they say. The guy was a little nutty, but hell, ain't we all? He babysat a lot of the town kids for extra money. They never said anything about him being crazy like that, or like what's being reported. Why doesn't the sheriff do something about it? Well, my break's over, honey. But if you want to know why the sheriff and the mayor won't do shit about what's really going on, you can ask them yourself. They're both dining over in the corner in there. They both walked in, and Fanny's order was sitting in front of her stool. She looked over at the sheriff, who was staring down at her, and then looked distastefully at the waitress. She dipped her toast in her egg yolks and played through her head what she would say to the police officer and the mayor. She hadn't received the warmest welcome so far, other than the waitress, and by the looks of the big boss man with a badge, she didn't think she'd get much of a welcome from him either. How are your eggs? The waitress asked. Great, Fanny lied. Greasy. My name's Loretta, by the way. Fanny Boie. Boy, that's a different last name. It's German. Lo? It was Sheriff. He was sitting down next to Fanny. Why don't you bugger off and, tend to your regular customers? I've got some words to have with our guest here. Good luck, Loretta said and walked away. Are you a reporter? The sheriff asked. No, sir, Fanny said, pulling the coffee cup to her mouth. I'm doing research for a friend. The sheriff grabbed the cup of coffee from her hand and placed it on the other side of himself. What does your friend want with Plainfield? Well, he's doing a book on the Plainfield butcher. Is that right? She nodded slowly. Seems to me your friend could just do his research from all the newspapers and news reports, couldn't he?
I suppose, but
Doesn't need to be sending a woman down here to stir everything up, does he?
I think you're being a little out of line right now. The sheriff leaned in really close.
These people around here already been through a lot, Miss whatever your name is.
Boy,
I'm sure I don't care. What I do care about is keeping the peace in my town. That's why they hired me to be the peacekeeper this little side of heaven. You understand, right?
His grin was predatory. She wanted to slap it off his face. What I understand, Sheriff Wilhelm, she says, reading his name tag, is that you spend a lot of time shoving things under this rug and didn't do a proper investigation. You arrested a man who the town believes is innocent, and I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you coerced Edward to confess.
The sheriff smiled, showing all his teeth. A hearty laugh bubbled up from his giant gut. The leather of his gun belt struggled under the stress. He returned the coffee cup to Fanny and motioned for Loretta to fill it. Little girl, he said, or boy if you prefer, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Oh, you big city creative types will really just print anything, won't you? We've got our man. Full confession. Plenty of evidence, though most of it burned up in the fire. But with a full confession, none of that evidence even matters. We're going to try him, miss, and he's going to be found guilty. Your friend won't have anything new to write about. Just rehashed sensationalism. So let me make a suggestion, if you don't mind. How about you finish your coffee? And by all means, try some of Loretta's pie. Get it with a little ice cream. Hell, I'll even flip for it. Then I want you to get back in that yellow shit trap outside and ride your slut ass out of my town.
Sheriff, Fanny started. The sheriff pounded his fat fist on the counter, and it made the coffee in her cup splash out, and Fanny jumped, and her heart stopped for a moment. I don't want to hear another word come out of your whore mouth. I will put you in jail, and none of your big city lawyers will be able to get you out. Do we understand each other, Miss Boie? Fanny nodded her head. Good. Now please, enjoy the pie and have yourself a safe trip home tonight. The sheriff nodded his head and put his hat atop it and walked out with the mayor. Fanny bit her lip, trying to hold back tears. Loretta stopped by and put her hand over hers to comfort her. Oh, honey, Loretta said, don't let that fat boy just get to you. Fanny collected her purse and went to leave money for her tab. Loretta told her it was okay and that she'd cover it. With a napkin, she held it to her eyes and walked hurriedly out of the diner. After collecting herself and taking a long hot shower at her hotel room, she wrapped herself in her hair and towels and called Lee. I told you what to expect, Lee said after she explained her day to him. I'm sorry you were treated like that, but I've prepared you. I need you to do me a favor, she said. What? I need you to look into the coroner's report regarding Henry's death. You really believe that waitress? Seriously? Yes. You always told me when you get closer to the truth, people are gonna buck. Well, people are bucking like a fucking Broncos down here, Lee. I think it would be wise to check into missing persons after Ed's arrest. I don't know, Fanny. I think that might be a little too... If you come up with nothing, then fine. I'm a paranoid idiot, and I'll come home. Wait, you're staying? You're goddamn right I'm staying. This is your story, Lee.
It's the brother. I just feel it. I really wish you'd come home, honey. If you don't write this book, Lee, I'm going to. Are you fucking kidding me? No. Please, just check on those things for me. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And you do your book on Ed like everyone else. That hurts, Fanny. You'll get over it. Thank you, honey. Love you. Please. Tread safely. I'll try. Love you too, sweets. Good night. Hints of spring were beginning to show. The snow had completely melted, and a light fog blanketed the brown grass. It was like a scene out of Blood of Dracula. Her car pulled up on the corner of 2nd Avenue and Archer Avenue in rural Plainfield. Visibility was low with all the fog mixed with the smoldering remains of Edward's homestead. She could smell the acrid scent of burnt wood and plastic. Fanny was relieved to see she had the place to herself. She snapped several photos of the smoking rubble that was once a house of horrors. As she walked the grounds, she began to think about this alternative theory she was working out in her head. Why would Ed take the fall for his brother? It was always said that Henry was the favorite. Perhaps he and the mother always ganged up on Ed. Maybe he was bullied into it. Or maybe Henry was dressing up as their mother and telling Ed what to do. That would make sense. Mother dies, Henry takes over the role of mother, literally. But Henry's supposed death. Didn't he supposedly die before their mother did? How would that work out? Unless Henry had been doing this all along, and maybe the townsfolk were talking. Maybe the mother and Henry decided to fake his death. If things got worse, and the killings became more daring, more public, Ed could take the fall for it. Of course he would, because Henry would be dead. Oh, Jesus Christ, Fanny thought out loud. I need to write this shit down. She was lost in thought. She hadn't seen she was walking near the foundation of the former house. The floor, covered in ash and weakened from the fire, had gave way. Fanny plummeted onto the cellar floor and landed into the dirt floor, knocking the wind from her lungs. Before she could struggle with getting her breath back, her camera that had flown from her hands came down under her head, and she went unconscious. Lee spent the last 2.5 hours on the phone with the Washtenaw County Coroner's Office. Could they confirm there was an autopsy on Ed's brother, Henry? No. Could they confirm the death of Henry? No. Was there even a goddamn body? That could not be confirmed either. What the fuck kind of coroner's office is that? He yelled more or less to himself. Their cat Shadow gave a struggled meow as if to acknowledge her owner's statement. He called the sheriff's department. Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office, a nasally female voice answered. Yes. Lee cleared his throat. I'm wondering if I'm able to get some information regarding the murders you've had down in Plainfield. One moment, please. A few moments later, a man comes on the line. Sheriff Wilhelm speaking. The tone was flat and gravelly. Hello, Sheriff. My name is Lee Decker. I'm calling from St. Paul, and I'm researching information on the butcher Plainfield. Sir, I've got plenty of things to do around here without people like you tying me up over phone calls. I would suggest you talk to your colleagues for information. Y'all write what you want about Ed anyways. Well, I'm actually more interested in his brother Henry. What about him? He's dead. Were you part of that investigation? The sheriff let out a sigh. Mister, he grumbled, there was no investigation. Ed reported his brother missing after burning some brush. Fire got out of hand and his brother got caught up in it. Fire seems to make a lot of things disappear in your part of the world. The fuck is that supposed to mean? Well, I just spoke with the coroner's office out your way, and they couldn't verify that Henry was even dead. Of course he's dead. Everyone, including myself, was at the funeral. I don't have time to listen to this nonsense. You must have been that bullying law enforcement officer that threatened my girlfriend. I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Decker. Now, if you excuse me, I've got more important things to attend to. Like pushing around people that are weaker than you? Will that be all? Nope. But I think I'll come down there and talk to you face to face. I don't think that would be a wise decision. Is that a threat? You'd like that, wouldn't you? Put that tripe in your rag, pencil neck. That'll sell you some more newspapers. See you. The phone disconnects. Lee chuckles to himself because he pushed the buttons on a bully. The smile fades as his writer's mind begins to launch conclusions in his head. If Fanny isn't right, his brain says, that means Henry is still alive out there. And if he's still at large, that means the killings will continue. Since the sheriff is resting on his laurels with his arrest of Edward, he's not going to try to... Oh, shit. Fanny is out there. She's in danger, and there isn't anyone out there that's going to be willing to help her. He picks up the phone and dials his friend Amy, who writes for the St. Paul Sentinel. Amy, he greets. This is Lee. How's the editing business going? Lee, she says. Lee Decker. To what do I owe this privilege? Have you another book you want to throw my way? Yes, actually, but that's not why I'm calling you. Oh, okay, what's up? I need a favor. Does it involve bailing you out of jail? Not yet. I need to borrow your car. Where's your car? Plainfield, Wisconsin. Fanny doing research on the butcher? Yep. I guess I can use my husband's car if necessary. When do you need it? Yesterday. I'll pick you up tonight at 6 p.m. Thank you, Ames. I owe you. Fanny awoke with a thunderous headache. The pain seemed to keep time with the beat of her heart. At first, she was unaware of where she was and remembered she was walking the grounds of Eddie's homestead. It was pitch black at first. Her eyes tried desperately to adjust. The smell of burned wood and mildew filled her nostrils. She tried to stand up, but something felt wrong with her ankle. Pain shot up from it and felt wrong and disconnected from the rest of her leg. She felt dried blood on her face from the head wound. That explained her headache, and she thought she probably broke her ankle. Her vision began to make out dull details, and she thinks she's in a cellar or basement. She looks up to see the hole she fell through, and she can barely make out a night sky filled with twinkling stars. I have to get out of here, she says in her head. I wish I could see. There's got to be some stairs or something around here. She tried to crawl around the damp dirt floor, but pain stabbed up from her ankle. She cries out, despite knowing that no one will hear her. This made her panic, and she began to whimper. Get your shit together, Fanny, she told herself. Take a deep breath and focus on the task at hand. She tried to stop herself from crying, but it came out anyways, her inner voice shaming her as she gets louder. There was a crunch from above, sounding like boots stepping on gravel or debris. Hope filled her chest. Hello? She shouted up to the hole. Is there anyone there? No, there isn't anyone there. You're in the middle of bumfuck Egypt. It's probably a deer or some critter.
or a wolf, or a coyote. Please don't be a wolf, she mutters to herself. Or worse yet, it could be him. It could be Henry, she whispered. The pattern of the footsteps stopped near the hole. She looked up. It was a half moon tonight. There, silhouetted above the hole, was the shape of a man. Help me, she said. Please, I've fallen, and I think I broke my ankle. The figure above only stood there staring down at her. Please? Can you come help me? Or call the police or something? If it's Henry, maybe he can come down there and cut your face off and wear it around for a while. Maybe he could cut out some pieces of you and eat them while you lay there helpless and horrified. Fanny squeezed her eyes shut to try and clear her vision, and also to shut up her inner voice that was trying to sabotage her rescue. Why won't you talk to me? She shouted. Please, help me. I broke my... The shape walked away and then came back carrying something. It looked like a large backpack or something. Then the man lifted it above his head and threw it down the hole. What are you? Her question cut off as she sees what was thrown down into the hole with her. She lets out a blood-curdling scream. It is half of a torso of what looks to be a man. The fall shot out the rest of the guts from where the man's waist would have been. The man's eyes were wide and empty with fear, his mouth wide open as if in mid-scream, and dried blood encrusted on the corners of his mouth like a morbid Fu Manchu. She hears another man's voice above her. He is screaming and cussing. He sounds terrified. He screams again, and then he is hurled into the hole. His body hits the previous guest, and whatever was left in the first man's torso is now expelled all over the floor. The second man is gasping for air, the wind knocked from his lungs. The expression on his face is similar to his predecessors, the difference being not only this one alive, but he appears to be missing his face. She lets out another scream and tries to crawl away from the horror in front of her. Please, the man says, trying to say please with no lips. Please. Oh, he must be a hunter. He's wearing camouflage. The eyes are bulging and moving about the sockets wildly, as if trying to focus on her. She screams and backs away into the shadows and keeps her eyes squeezed shut as tears gush from them. Please! The man kept screaming. Please stop screaming, she shouted in her head. For the love of God, please stop. I can't take any more. It seemed like hours that he brayed on in his lipless pleas, but really, it was only minutes. He eventually tired out and only uttered deep gurgles. Something was splashing from his death's head grin. Eventually, he was quiet. Fanny cried herself to sleep. It was daytime. She awoke listening to the wrens chittering back and forth to one another. The sound brought a glimmer of hope to her, but then when she crawled out of her hiding spot, she saw the corpses of the two hunters. They laid there in a sunbeam as dust floated gently above them. The faceless one, still making soft wet sounds, but looked to be dead. It was hard to tell because there were no eyelids on his eyes. His entire face had been removed. This proves her theory, she thinks. The real murderer, the real butcher of Plainfield, is still at large, while his little brother Eddie sits in a mental institution awaiting his trial. If she only had access to a phone, she could call Lee, she could call the sheriff, and he could eat his words.
She had the story that no one else could tell, but she had to get out of here. With daylight peeking through the hole and a few cracks in the floorboards, she thought she should be able to find a staircase. She looked around and found stone steps going up into the darkness. Also hanging from the hooks embedded in the ceiling were what looked like human organs and limbs. She let out a small cry, seeing ruddy faces nailed to the beams, holding up the main floor. She had to keep it together and concentrate on those steps. "Cellar steps," she said in her head. "They've got to lead to the door going outside." She could crawl up. She had to deal with her broken ankle. She had tried to turn her foot, and it stayed in place when she moved her leg. It was turned in an awkward angle that shouldn't be there if it was connected by bones and cartilage. She tried to lift her leg, but pain stabbed its way up her leg, and she bit her lip and held back her cries. What if Henry is still out there? She wondered. Maybe he wouldn't be out there in the broad daylight. That would expose his existence, but no. He only operated at night. But I am in the middle of nowhere. Shit! No matter. She had to deal with her ankle, first and foremost. She looked around and there were plenty of burned planks lying about. She pulled off her leather belt and folded it up and placed it in her mouth. Putting a plank on both sides of her foot, she lifted her leg to straighten out her foot. The pain was excruciating, and she thought she'd bite through her leather belt. She took her bandana from her hair and wrapped the two burned planks and tightened them. More pain. She took another deep breath and knotted the bandana as tight as she could. With that done, the pain was less, and she thought as long as she didn't put any pressure on that foot, she should be able to hobble over to those steps. Fanny gripped the nearby beam and pulled herself up slowly. Sweat poured down into her eyes and down her back. Still painful, but manageable, her hand touched something soft and leathery. She screamed, seeing it was a face, and fell back on her butt. "God damn it!" she cursed in her head. "Cut your teeth and bear it, Fanny! You got this shit!" She pulled herself up again, trying not to gag, with the ragged face looking at her with eyeless holes. She hopped to the next beam and decided that was a bad idea. The pain began to pound with her pulse again. She tried to step, drag her motion, and that proved to be less painful. Hope raised up in her stomach, deafening the hunger growls that were plaguing her. She had no idea how long she'd been down here anymore, but there were steps. She would crawl up them, make her way out, get to her car, and drive into town to the hospital. Did Plainfield have a hospital? She wondered. No matter. There were 10 steps. It was agonizing as her broken ankle scraped against the stone steps at each one as she climbed. But she was desperate, and her adrenaline was kicking in. Her head lightly bumped into the door, but hit right where her head wound was, and she winced in pain. She forgot that her belt was still clenched in her teeth until she felt drool leak from her lips. She sat on her ass cheeks and braced her arms above her head and bit down onto the leather belt. Fanny felt the door lift a few inches and stop. Something was stopping it. She pushed a few more times and realized there was a chain across the handles outside. "Motherfucker!" she screamed. "Motherfucker! Let me the fuck out of here!" She wanted to cry again. That small bit of hope she had dancing in her stomach was beginning to dwindle, and hunger pangs got louder. Fanny was exhausted. She laid sideways on the steps and fell asleep. I'm not sure what I'm seeing here, George," a man's voice said above the hole. "Any guesses?" It's hard to tell this high up, the other male voice said. You reckon it's a body? Fanny heard them coming out of a dream. She was dreaming that she was at the diner and was enjoying a slice of Loretta's famous pie. It was apple, she thinks, with a dollop of vanilla ice cream. The two were speaking about drafting a book about the theory about which they had spoken. I think you might be right, the first male voice said. Might explain that car parked on the road over there. There was a beam from the flashlight swinging about the two hunters that laid there beneath the hole. Hello? Fanny called out. Her voice was raspy and parched. Is there somebody up there? Did you hear that? The second voice said. I thought I heard... Fanny skidded down the steps and yelped when she landed at the bottom. She got on her stomach and started to crawl towards the hole and the beam of light. Please, she tried to shout. Help me! I'm stuck and I broke my ankle! Hello? Came the first male voice. She thought she recognized it. Hello? This is Sheriff August Wilhelm. Who's down there? Sheriff Wilhelm! She shouted as she reluctantly got to the bodies of the hunters. Please, God help me! I tried the doors, but they were... The beam hit her in the eyes, and she squinted and put her hand over them to shade them. Huh, the sheriff said. Thought for sure I heard. I'm right here, she shouted. Hey, don't do this to me, please! She recognized the other man standing up near the entrance to the hole. It was the man who ate lunch with him at the diner, the mayor. He stood there looking straight at her, but thin-lipped. I thought I heard it too, the mayor said. Ah, well, the sheriff said. Probably just a pile of clothes down there. I think you're right. What about the car? I'll have Rusty in town come tow it in the morning. No! Fanny shouted from the hole. No, this ain't right. God damn it, help me, you son of a bitch! Damn, the sheriff said, pulling up the collar of his jacket. Wind is howling tonight. Henry is still alive, she screamed. And he's still killing. For fuck's sakes, you got the wrong person. She could have sworn the sheriff stopped and looked at her right in the eyes. Sheriff, the mayor said, what about the pile of clothes down there? What do you suggest, George? The sheriff said. Do you want to climb down there and break your neck for a pile of clothes? George Phillips did not. Probably just kids fucking around, drinking and getting sexy. You're probably right, Sheriff. Fucking perverts. Come on, let's call it a night. You can't leave me down here, Fanny cried. Please don't go. She screamed at them until she heard the sheriff start his coronet and his tires crumble the gravel beneath them. No, she muttered, defeated. This can't be happening. She was starving, but the look and smell of the hunters made her lose her appetite. She curled up into a dark corner and fell asleep with the hope that Lee would be worried enough to look for her. Of course he will, she thought. I don't know how long I've been down here, but I know it's been longer than a day. If he hadn't heard from me. Oh, please, Lee, be on the way. Please. I don't know that I can take this much more. She could hear crickets chirping somewhere in the dark with her, and that small comfort lulled her to sleep. As Fanny was splinting her ankle, Amy had pulled up to her and Lee's apartment. Lee got in and drove Amy back home. He was going to wait until tomorrow morning to leave, but he didn't hear from her. He called her hotel, and she was still checked in, but hadn't been in since yesterday.
He was at Stevens Point, Wisconsin by 1:30 a.m. She still hadn't been by the hotel. He was granted a key to her room, and he went in. Her suitcase was there, a full half ashtray, a bottle of vodka and a bucket of water, and some of her clothes lying about the floor. Laid on the bed was a Gideon Bible. "What the fuck, Fanny?" Lee said out loud. "Since when did you get so religious?" Sticking out of the Bible under the front cover was a map that was folded haphazardly. He pulled it out and unfolded it. She had circled the city of Almond and wrote Mary's Tavern on it. Below that she circled Spiritland Cemetery and had scratched it out violently. There was a tear from her red pen. A tear from her red pen. She had also scratched out the cemetery in the town of Hancock. There was a circle around Plainfield with the words Warden's Hardware written by it, and Loretta at Diner. And also Sheriff Wilhelm. Southwest of Plainfield there was a red X with Eddie's House of Horrors written by it at the intersection of 2nd Avenue and Archer Avenue. It was late, and he didn't think he was going to get anywhere with anybody at this hour. The sheriff would surely be in bed and doubted very much that he'd get out of bed for Lee's phone call. He decided to rest here and head to Mary's Tavern first thing in the morning, and then into the village of Plainfield after that. August Wilhelm was a local boy, grew up in rural Plainfield, and was raised by devout Lutheran Wisconsin Synod parents. They were strict, but not fanatical, like Ed and Henry's mother. He worked on his parents' farm as a teenager, and also part-time at the neighbor's hog farm. He served as constable in the small nearby village of Tennyson Grove. It wasn't much of a law enforcement job, mostly checking doors at night and keeping the drunks in line after the bar closes. The county commissioner, Levi Heinrich, was an elder at his church and pulled some strings to get him on the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department. He was sworn in as one of the 4 deputies and served under Sheriff Ned Eversman. Not long after that, he married his high school sweetheart, Gladys Hines. They never had any kids. Lazy sperm, the doctors said. But August told himself and everyone else that it was because his wife was barren. They were married a good 10 years, a silent 5 years, and then she passed away from unchecked ovarian cancer. 2 years passed and the local folks voted him in as sheriff after Eversman retired. He liked the job, loved the power and the respect he commanded. It was an easy job, relatively quiet. Sure, there were a few issues with drunks, and sometimes the teens would be tearing it up out on Highway KK, but otherwise quiet. When news came out that Bernice Warden had turned up missing with blood all over the hardware store, he was knocked off his secure, quiet pedestal. When she was found at Ed and Henry's place, hanging upside down and dressed like a deer carcass, things just got worse. The horrors just kept coming. Body parts made into furniture and trinkets, faces dried out and hung on the walls, and that goddamn suit. That goddamn suit made out of flesh. Jesus Christ. All of this was happening right under his nose, on his watch. Out of all the citizens under his authority, it was Eddie, the silent, helpful man that never said an ill word about anybody, was always trying to help someone, always trying to keep his bitchy psycho mama happy. It was him. He confesses. Then he tells everyone that he was digging up bodies out of the goddamn cemetery, carving up pieces to make a costume to look like his dead mama. Jesus on a motherfucking crutch. Then the hordes of reporters and looky-loos, all of them, thousands of them, and the people of this country were all looking at him. How could he let this happen? What else was happening under his watchful eye? So they dug. They dug and dug and dug and dug. If
they didn't find anything, then they would throw out their goddamn theories. Pretty soon every missing person in a 20-mile radius was his fault. Finally, with Ed's admission, and all the questions asked in several hundred diverse ways, the smoke had cleared. The townsfolk had had enough, and so had he. The last straw was them wanting to auction off all of Ed's things. Morbid, God-forsaken perverts. All of them. And thankfully, the townfolk got together, put a torch to that accursed place. And now this bitch from Minnesota has to show up and get everyone riled up again with the theory that Ed's brother is still alive and was the one that was committing all the goddamn murders. Well, he'd be damned if he was going to let this two-bit skirt shake up the peace in his community. You couldn't sleep either? Came the voice of Mayor Phillips. August looked at his pocket watch. 4:36 a.m. What's on your mind, George? August asked. Same thing that's on yours. George walked into his office and sat down. Got any coffee? Over by Debbie's desk. You want one? Sure, black. George Phillips comes back in with 2 steaming paper cups of coffee. You know, the sheriff says, rocking in his office chair, my granddad told me once, when I was about 9, that if I ever had to lie about something important, he said, deny it till you die. Is that what we're going to do? The mayor asked nervously. That girl's boyfriend is going to show up here eventually looking for her. You know that. He's going to ask to file a missing persons report. Are you going to? He'll have to prove that little Miss Fancy Pants was here. Well, that shouldn't be too hard. She was at the diner, chatted with Loretta. She may have even gone over to the hardware store and talked to Bernice's son. She didn't go there. I already checked. So then, all we have to worry about is Loretta? Possibly. Gonna have to talk with Archie and see if he can't give her a few days off until this blows over. That way, if the boyfriend shows up, he's got no one to talk to. Think he'll do it? Archie? Yeah, he owes me. Overlooked a few things I caught him at. He'll do it if he knows what's good for him. What's good for this town. What did he do, if you don't mind me asking? Better not ask me that, George. What about that woman's car? Had Rusty bring it to the scrapyard. Told him someone must have broken down and abandoned it. George swallowed the last of his coffee. He looked nervous behind his Coke bottle glasses. You are okay with all this, right? August said to him in a semi-threatening voice. I'm doing all of this. We're doing all of this. For the town's sake, right? George nodded his head and wondered when he'd ever be able to sleep again. Lloyd Mayweather poured a 5-count of Jack Daniels and then put a splash of Royal Crown soda in it and slid it to the young man sitting on the other side of the bar. I told you I didn't want to drink, Lee said, with a little spite sprinkled on it. I heard what you said, buddy, Lloyd said, but you seem a little aggravated and I don't want any trouble in here. Lee shook a Lucky Strike from his soft pack and licked the end and popped it in his lips. Snapped a Zippo and took a sharp, quick drag, held it, and then blew it out. Then he grabbed the drink in front of him and gulped it half done. Easy, buddy, Lloyd said. I don't want to be pouring you out of here either. So, have you seen Franny or not? Lee spat. Yeah, she was in here. Franny Boie, right? Lee nodded. Yeah, she came in a week ago. Beautiful gal. Looked like one of them pin-up girls. Cut the shit, man. I haven't heard from her in a few days. Did you call the sheriff? That fucking lazy idiot. He won't return my calls. So, she hasn't been in since a week ago? Roughly. I hope she turns up. She was sassy, but I got along with her. Thanks. Lee slammed the rest of his drink, crushed his cigarette out, and left. His next stop was Warden Hardware in Plainfield. A young man inside said he'd heard about her poking around the area, asking about Henry, but she never stopped in the hardware store. Lee walked across to the diner. He asked for Loretta, but was told she was out sick. When questioned about a phone number or an address, the owner told him that he didn't hand out personal information on his employees to strangers. I get it, Lee said, pulling out a cigarette. Can you tell me if my girlfriend has been in? Last time I talked to her, she said her and Loretta became friends. Hey, Mac, the owner said, no smoking in my place. You want to kill yourself, do it outside my establishment. Nobody wants to smell that shit when they're eating. Lee snapped the cigarette in half and threw it on the counter. Well, if your food is anything like your customer service, I'm shocked you got any customers at all. How about you fuck the hell out of here, the owner said, before I call the cops. Call them. I'm heading over there now. Sheriff Wilhelm was just getting off the phone with Archie Dunnell, the owner of the diner, when a very perturbed Lee Decker walked into the front door of the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office. Can I help you? Angie, the front desk operator, asked, a little frightened. How about you get that worthless sheriff of yours out here? Lee spat. I need to have some words with him. Hold your horses, Williams said, walking out of his office with his hand on the butt of his revolver. If you want to have a conversation, that's fine. But if you want to throw a fit, then you can spend some time in the hoosgow cooling your jets. Fanny is missing, Lee said. You won't answer my calls. You've silenced everyone she's been in contact with, and I'm pretty goddamn sure you aren't going to take a missing persons report. Get in my office. Let's talk this shit out. Angie, hold my calls. Lee brushed past him and sat down in the chair behind his desk. The sheriff took a big sigh, closed the door behind him, and plopped down in his chair and folded his hands in front of him. What did you say your girlfriend's name was? Wilhelm asked. Was it Franny? You know goddamn well what it was, Lee said, frowning. Mr. Decker, if you want to file a missing persons report, then I'm going to need you to calm your ass down and give me her full legal name. It's Fanny Dolores Boie. Is that B-O-Y? It's B-O-I-E. Well, ain't that fancy. And her date of birth? March the 3rd, 1927. So that'd make her 31. Yes. Can you give me a description of her, please, for the record? Give me a fucking break, fat boy. You know what she looked like. You bullied her over at the diner. Wilhelm held up his meaty index finger and jabbed it at Lee. I'm going to tell you one last time, Ryder boy. Clean up your shit, or we're done here, and you sit in jail for the night. So what's it going to be? So you're denying that you ever talked to her at the diner? Son, I talked to a lot of people in my capacity, especially with the whole Eddie mess. I can't recall talking to anybody at the diner other than the good mayor. I think I'd remember talking to somebody named Franny Boie. She called me and told me she talked to you. She said you were rude and rather threatening. So try pulling both my legs, why don't you? Well, if that's what she said, then my apologies. But I really can't recall being rude to anybody. Perhaps it was one of my deputies. A few of them can be hot-headed at times, especially if they feel a woman's being a little sassy. Lee wanted to punch the sheriff in his fat, jowly mouth. He knew he'd end up in jail, for sure, and he would be no help to Fanny if he did that. He was itching to have a cigarette, but figured Johnny Lawman here wouldn't have liked that either. "Can we get on with this report, please?" Lee finally said. Wilhelm grinned a little and showed the nubbins that were his teeth. "I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Decker. Other than hearsay, I can't verify that your Miss Boie was ever even here." Lee glared at the sheriff. "She had a hotel room up at Stevens Point at the Holiday Inn." "And that's fine," Wilhelm said. "Then you need to take this up with Stevens Point PD. That's out of my jurisdiction." "She had this map. I had all the places she was going to visit, and Plainfield was one of those places." "Well, unless you can have a witness from here come into my office and tell me they saw your girlfriend in town, I can't do anything for you." "Tell me how to get a hold of Loretta." "Who?" "Oh, come on, Loretta, from the goddamn diner." "Mr. Decker, the people of this town have been plagued by your kind enough. They're tired of your questions and tired of you all poking your nose in their business. They entrusted me to keep the peace in this fine community, and by God, that's what I'm going to do. I suggest you get in your car, agitate the gravel, and take your problems to Stevens Point." Lee's hands balled into fists. His forearms ached to release a thunderous punch into the fat man in uniform across from him. "Get in your car," those words echoed in his head. "Get in your car and agitate the gravel." Lee turned and looked at the sheriff in his grayish eyes. "My car," Lee said. "People in this town had to have seen my car." Wilhelm's voice twitched slightly. He was a good poker player, but this boy from the big city of St. Paul was getting under his skin. "Ain't that your car over there parked in the front of the diner?" the sheriff asked. "No, that one's a lender." "Well, regardless, people see cars come and go from here all the time." "Not like mine, they don't. Fanny borrowed it to come up here. It's a 1951 Kaiser Manhattan. It's canary yellow. There's nothing but pickup trucks and old Ford sedans driving around here, and most of them black." Wilhelm pretended to scribble something in his notebook and then looked up at Lee. The grin returned, but it wasn't as confident as the one he wore a few minutes ago. "Okay, then," he said. "I've got the description of the car. Any of my deputies report that they've seen it, I'll have them contact you. What was your number?" Lee stood up from his chair. "My girlfriend is missing, and that is sad for me. For you, the sad part is if my girlfriend is right about Henry being alive and Ed being the patsy, then more people will die, perhaps even my Fanny. And maybe she's already dead, all because of your ignorance, your lazy police work, and your unwillingness to serve and protect. You think they point their fingers at you already? It'll be worse when this all comes out. I sincerely hope I'm wrong. Good day, Sheriff Fat Boy." Lee left the office, half expecting to either be hit or at least thrown in jail. Wilhelm didn't either. He lit a cigarette when he got into his car, exhaled, and looked at Franny's map. "Okay, honey," he muttered to himself. "Next stop, the House of Horrors." Loretta slammed down the phone. She had spent the last 15 minutes arguing with her boss, Archie. He had mysteriously given her the last few days off, telling her she needed a break and thought she'd been working too hard. A couple of days was fine, but she was getting bored, and she had to pay rent. "Look," Archie said, "if you need a few bucks to get you by, that's fine. I'll pay you. Just take another couple of days off to..." "I've cleaned my place about 100 times, Archie," she said, irritated. "I'm going nuts. Just let me come back to work." "Take a vacation. Go to the Dells or something." "With what? My looks? I can give you money for... What's going on, Arch? You're the cheapest guy I know. You mysteriously give me a few days off, and now you're willing to pay me to have off? Pay for a trip to the Dells? Something's up, and you need to fess up. Don't have a bird low. I'm just trying to give you a break for all your hard work. This is the thanks I get. A shit sandwich on burnt toast. You're a peach, lady. I'll give you that. I'll find work somewhere. I'll find work somewhere else. Heard they need a bartender over at... Lo, come on. I'm not kidding, Archie. Lo. End of conversation. She sat out on her garden-level patio and cracked a beer and lit a cigarette. The sky was blue, and the first robins of spring were singing their songs. She didn't notice because she was so heated her face was flushed with anger. Good afternoon, Loretta, greeted Scooter Larson. He was an older gentleman that lived upstairs from her in 5G. Hey, Mr. Larson, she said with a hint of aggravation. Scooter, if you please. We're neighbors after all. Sorry, I've been having a bad day. How are you, Scooter? Can I offer you beer? I'd love one. He smiled and sat in the other lawn chair on the patio. She took a deep breath. Scooter was retired and lived alone. A conversation with him was never less than an hour. Loretta went into her fridge and got a bottle of Blatz and popped the top and walked back out onto the patio. Scooter took a swig and let out a long as Loretta sat down. What were you out doing today? She asked. Went to the scrap yard, he said. His funds were limited and often turned in scrap metal he'd collect all around town for extra cash. Did you make a haul? 48 American cents. Well, I guess you're buying dinner tonight. They both laughed. Saw one of the strangest cars sitting in the yard there, Scooter said. It was bright yellow. It was covered in mud like it'd been through the country, but it looked pretty clean. Don't see many bright-colored cars in these parts, Loretta said. Had the ragtop on it, too. Slick-looking car. Rusty said it was a Kaiser Manhattan. Only about 10,000 of them came off the assembly line before they went broke. Loretta thought she remembered seeing a yellow car before. I asked him how a car like that found its way out to a junkyard in the middle of Timbuktu, Wisconsin, Scooter continued. Said the sheriff had him tow it. Said it was abandoned out in the country. Probably some tourist taking the scenic route across country. She remembered. She was sure it was the car that gal from St. Paul. Franny, her name was. Do you remember where the plates were from? Loretta said. Minnesota, think. Maybe it was Missouri. Scooter scratched his patchy beard. My eyesight ain't what it used to be. I asked Rusty if he was going to crush it. He laughed, and I asked if I wanted to buy it off him. I didn't find that particular crack funny at all. No, he said. Sheriff had strict orders to crush it. Scooter Larson went on about the weather and thought the last winter had been a little harsher than the other years. He asked her if she was a Cubs or a White Sox fan. Then there was something about her neighbor in 3F. She never answered him. Only nodding here and there, her mind was on Franny and the conversation they had the other day. Where she and why was her car awaiting Rusty's crusher? It was beginning to smell in that dank cellar. The aroma was like rotting vegetables mixed with that burnt stink of wood. It was too early in the spring for the insects to be making a meal of the two dead hunters.
That smell was the only thing keeping her ravenous hunger at bay. The thought of food only made her stomach sick. She had no awareness of time. Franny drifted in and out of consciousness, having dreams and nightmares simultaneously. She only knew it was nighttime by the lack of light coming in from the hole in the ceiling, and the songs of the crickets and frogs. Where are you? She thought of Lee. Where in the hell are you? I can't do this anymore. I may go mad. She hadn't run into Henry, if that's who that stranger was that threw the hunters down here, and was thankful for that. But she was beginning to lose hope of hearing from Lee. He should be here by now. Maybe he is and just hasn't found his way to this vacation spot. Maybe. But she highly doubted that. She thought him intelligent and would be able to trace her here. Maybe he ran into the sheriff. Lost his shit with that ignoramus and got himself put in jail. Oh, shit. Which would be a bad thing. An unbelievably bad thing. Her ankles. Her ankle was swollen and turning from purple to black. She was sure that was not a good sign. The pain persisted, but she was getting used to it now. A low-grade fever beaded up on her forehead with sweat and gave her shivers. She knew there were rats down here. She had seen them feeding on pieces of her two roommates. Franny couldn't handle the sounds they were making when munching away at their flesh, the scratching noises as they tried to burrow through their clothes. There was yipping coming from above, distant at first, but now it was closer. Coyotes, she thought. Goddamn coyotes. They smell that heap over there. The yipping noise was filled with more, and soon it was so loud she had to cover her ears. It echoed through the cellar. Shut up! She yelled. For a moment they did stop, then noticed she wasn't a threat, and they started up again. The high-pitched crying went on for at least a half hour, while they tried to figure out how to get down to their meal. What am I going to do if they get down here? They'll see I'm helpless and realize I've got a nice, delicious hunk of meat rotting away on my leg. Oh, Jesus. Oh, fucking Jesus. The feral crying began to quiet down, and she heard tires crawling along the gravel driveway. Lee? She crawled painfully towards the rotting heap and saw headlights shine on the coyotes. They looked towards the source of the light, and one by one they began to disperse. There is a God. Oh, thank you. It has to be Lee. Relief began to wash over her. Hey! She noticed her voice was hoarse. She was dehydrated, and her throat felt like she had sand in the back of it. Lee, is that you? She heard a car door shut and footsteps towards the hole. Hello? She shouted. Help me! Please! What if it's that goddamn sheriff? Franny? It was a female voice. Franny, is that you? Yes! The voice wasn't familiar to her at first. Yes, it's me! Oh, God, thank God, yes! Loretta got on her knees and looked into the hole. Franny? She said. Loretta! Franny croaked. Oh, thank you so much. It's so good to see you. Oh, God, honey. How do you get out of there? Loretta couldn't see what was down there. It was pitch black. I think there's a door to your left, but something's blocking it. It's chains, I think. Hang on, I'll check. She hears Loretta walk over to the door while she crawls over to those stone steps again. The chains jingle in protest as Loretta tries to pull the doors open. They thump back into place. Hang on, honey. Loretta's voice is muffled through the doors. I'm going to get something to pry this open. Franny hears her moving
wood around and glass tinkling, then a loud metal scraping noise, and she's at the doors again. She has found a long metal fence post and threads it between the coiled chain. Rusty metal creaks, and then there's a loud snap, and the chains clink onto the ground. Fanny struggles to crawl up the steps as Loretta pulls open both doors. The spring night air comes in a welcoming gush and hits her sweaty skin. Fanny breathes it in and can't help but smile. "Oh, you poor thing," Loretta says. Her shape is silhouetted by the car's headlights. "Let's get you out of there before them goddamn coyotes come back." "I can't walk," Fanny says painfully. "I've broken my ankle." "Well, shit. Okay, I'll come down to you." She descends sideways down the steps, slowly as she makes out the shape of Fanny, who is lying on the bottom. "Let's take a look at you," Loretta says, bending down to her. "Oh, Jesus, girl. Your leg's a mess. Smells like shit down here. What's rotten down here?" Just help me up, please," Fanny says. "You don't want to know what's down here." Fanny puts her arms around Loretta's neck and begins to lift her. Fanny hasn't put any weight on that ankle and isn't sure what it's going to be like. "Easy does it, honey," Loretta says. They're both standing, Fanny a little hunched and nervous about her ankle. They make it to the first step, and she looks up to gauge how far her distance is going to be. 10 steps, she mutters. "That's right, Fanny. Just 10. We've got 9 more. You can do this." By habit, Fanny tries to put weight on her broken ankle, and she shrieks in pain. Loretta almost drops her, but recovers and lifts her back up. 8 more to go, Fanny," Loretta cheers. Fanny looks up at the open doorway. There's a shape of someone at the top. Male. And even with the silhouette, she can tell it's Lee. "Lee?" she almost says, half crying. "Oh, God, Lee, is that you?" Loretta almost drops her for the second time. Scared by a sudden presence standing behind them, she uses the inertia to climb up the next step. "Is that your man?" Loretta asks. "Yes!" Fanny bursts into tears. "Well, maybe you can give us a hand, mister. Your girly friend is a handful." His face becomes clearer to her. She knows that mass of black curls. Lee? A hand?" Loretta asks. Her back is towards him, and she stops awaiting his reply. He takes a step down, and she notices he moves differently. Maybe he's hurt, Fanny thinks. "Lee?" she says. "Are you okay?" He comes down another step, and the headlights reveal more details. His facial features are recognizable. Something strange around the eyes. Is that blood? It's running down his temples, too. Lee, honey, what's the... It was his face. But that's all it was. His face. The rest of it was foreign. The body was someone else's. "Oh, Jesus Christ! Loretta!" The man pulled the bloody Lee face mask off and plunged the fence post Loretta had used to gain access into her back, and the rusted tip poked through her chest. She spat blood into Fanny's face, her eyes wide with terrified surprise. They both tumbled down the steps, and Fanny went unconscious. It was daylight when Fanny awoke. She thought the previous night was a nightmare, and she was blinking, her eyes trying to purge it from her mind. But she kept hearing a sound. Light shined down from both the hole above and the open cellar doors. The bodies of the hunters were gone, and only a sticky, muddy puddle remained. Beyond that, Her short-time friend, Loretta, was hanging upside down. Hooks pushed through her Achilles tendon, and she hung there naked, the fence post still impaled through her. She was making those ucking noise from somewhere deep in her throat. "Oh, Loretta," she cried, "I'm so sorry." The man, with Lee's blood crusted on his face and hair, was sharpening a fillet knife. She didn't know what Henry looked like. It could be him, had to be him. He looked a little like Ed. "You leave her alone," she shouted. "You leave her the fuck alone, you goddamn freak!" The man turned to look at her and then went back to begin his work. "Fanny," Loretta groaned. "Help me." Fanny tried to pull herself towards her friend. "Stop," her voice cracked. "For the love of God, stop!" As the man began to carve into Loretta's calf, a shot rang out and echoed against the stone cellar walls. Fanny's ears rang, and for a moment she thought it may be the sheriff. A dark spot began to soak through the man's shirt, and then there was another shot. It went in through the back of the man's head, at the base of his skull, and blood spattered all over Loretta's feet. The man rocked and dropped the knife. Fanny looked over and saw the mayor standing there with a smoldering .38. His face was pale and sweaty. She looked back over at the man who seemed to be recovering from his gunshot wounds. "That last shot should have shattered his spine. How is he still moving?" The mayor let off one more shot at the man's face, his real face, spattered all over Loretta's shins and knees like a bloody oatmeal. The man fell to his knees and then onto his side. I'm sorry," the mayor stuttered. Are you okay?" "My ankle is broke," she said through tears. "But I don't think Loretta's doing so good." The mayor went over and struggled to lift her off the hooks. By the time he got her down, she had passed away with one last gasp of a dying breath. "This is how we found Bernice Warden," the mayor said. His eyes were round with terror. "You son of a bitch," Fanny said. "You're part of this." "No," the mayor said meekly. No. You and that fucking sheriff. This is all on you guys. No, please, I admit it. All these deaths, including my boyfriend's, Loretta's, those hunters, all on you and Wilhelm. Please, forgive me." There was another shot, this time louder than the others. In an instant, Mayor George Phillips' head disintegrated under the force of a hollow point. "You're forgiven, George," the sheriff mumbled. What are you doing?" Fanny said. Her green eyes were wide and intense. Everything was playing out like a nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. She tried to crawl away from the sheriff. "I'm cleaning up my mess, Miss Boie," Wilhelm said. "I'm going to fill this cellar with gasoline and throw a match into that hole up there." "You won't get away with this," she said through her tears. "You have to pay for all those murders." "Trust me, I do. I haven't had a decent night's sleep since I walked into this house and found everything that I did. But now, all my loose ends are tied up. Henry is still dead. The bodies will be disposed of. I'll have a crew come out and fill the hole when the fire's burned out. All nice, clean, and wrapped up. I've kept the peace, you see. I've saved this town." "You're a police officer!" You can't kill me. You can't just walk away from all of this. Oh, but I can. The people here are tired of all the sensationalism. Eddie's off to his treatment so he can stand trial, and the last of the town's irritants are dealt with. No, I will not let you get away with this. Oh, I already have, darling. Fanny heard his thumb pull the hammer back on his 44. It went click. A few more tears flooded her cheeks before the darkness came. And that, my friends, is the end of not Thin Spots, but of Eddie's Basement. Holy cow, that was a freaking 2 hour. That's a 2 hour. That's a damn 2 hour story. Holy cow! Thank you all very much for hanging out as long as you have. If you guys are still here, unless you guys fell asleep or not. In the meantime, I see that there's 4 people still on, so I don't know what that means. But anyhow, thank you guys very much for showing up. Be sure to tune in next week. If that one gets as long as this one, then we're gonna just cut it into 2 nights. So, but anyhow, thank you guys very much for coming here and showing up. That was a good one. Thanks, Shannon. That's probably one of my favorite ones to write, actually. So, but anyhow, yeah. So tune in next week. It's going to be the last story of Thin Spots. So, and it's another long one. So yeah, we'll have to be here. Sick bastard. You're welcome, Bobby. So yeah, there's going to be a Tunes for Tuesday, which we postponed from last night to next Tuesday, and of course then there's going to be a horror hump day. It's late for me now, and I'm tired of talking and stuff. So, and I spilled me coffee. Almost dropped it on the laptop. That's not good. So anyhow, I love you guys. Good night, brother. Thanks for making sure I won't sleep. You're welcome. Yeah, see, you weren't sleeping anyway, so who cares if I went 2 hours long, right? Anyhow, thank you guys all very much. It was so good. I'm glad you liked it, Beth. I'm glad to know that one was your favorite one. So that's cool. So, all right, you guys, have a great night, and we will talk to you next week. Have an awesome weekend. I get to go meet up with my grandkids tomorrow and have lunch with them. Woot woot. So, all right. Have a good night, you guys. Love you. Bobby, thank you very much for the stars. You made me 100 stars richer, man. That was beautiful. Beautiful. Have a great night. Peace and a bottle of hair grease.